If you were spanking new to fashion and you asked me, what should I buy? I'd tell you to start with vintage and Uniqlo. And if you had asked me, what's next? I'd direct you to vintage Comme des Garçons. Really? You're asking beginners to wear this? You might be saying. I have a feeling that most people out there probably don't have a full picture of what Comme des Garçons really is. Your average person only knows it for the heart shoes, and fashion freaks only know it for the avant-garde runway creations. This mischaracterization is likely intentional, but that is not the whole picture. In fact, Comme des Garçons actually makes a lot of basic clothing under the Comme des Garçons Homme line, which has unfortunately become the ugly duckling within CdG, compared to its more prestigious siblings who get Fashion Week runways. And high-quality fashion basics have become its own trend lately. Every week, it feels like a new brand is jumping into the fray. It's starting to feel like a uniform commodity, with all these brands tracing the same groove set by 𝗵𝗫𝗽𝗀, Margaret Howell, and others. One that can be ultimately traced back to 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀 and Comme des Garçons. In my opinion, Comme des Garçons Homme still has an incredibly sharp vision of what does it actually mean to create high-quality fashion basics. And that vision was defined by Keiichi Tanaka during his tenure at Homme in the 90s. It's really curious just how forgotten Tanaka is. When you talk about the CdG family, everyone knows 𝗲, everyone knows 𝗔𝘁𝗁𝗃 and Kei, but barely anyone knows about Tanaka. Except if you're in Japan, where Tanaka-era Homme has always had a cult following, and it's actually having a sort of resurgence lately. It makes complete sense. Personally, I own a Tanaka-era shirt, and it contains so many interesting small design details that really prove why he's so appreciated in Japan. He understands something that many contemporary designers are overlooking. So first of all, I can't be the only one to feel the inherent contradiction of making basics at Comme des Garçons out of all places. I mean, you are the one who took a hammer to the European fashion establishment, ripping out holes and adding lumps, and now you want to make normal clothes? Rei Kawakubo's answer is just yes, specifically for men. You see, Rei actually didn't make clothing for men at first, but starting in late 70s Japan, there was a major societal shift. Similar to what's happening today in the West, men started becoming interested in fashion. For the first time, guys weren't ashamed to dress up. This phenomenon was called the DC brand boom, which I talked about in more detail on my video series on Yoji. This was all nice and good, but something bothered Rei. During the DC brand boom, many of the brands that popped up had a different vision for men, a vision that Rei herself did not agree with. If you look at pictures from this era, you'll see guys were dressing themselves up in these really brash, loud, colorful outfits, almost like how guys in the 2010s would deck themselves out in logomania. Rei had a question. Do men really need these over-designed clothes? Is wearing clothes that look like women's fashion really what makes a man stylish? Thus, Comme des Garçons Homme was born. For Homme, to the surprise of many, Rei declared that she wanted to be faithful to the basics. The basics are fundamental. And just like how people think Wise is the diffusion line for Yoji, when in fact it came first, in the Comme universe for men, in the beginning there was Homme, specifically in 78. Homme Plus only came later in 84. Our protagonist, Keiichi Tanaka, enters a picture at 1990. He shows up to CdG headquarters unannounced, portfolio in hand. Likely to his own surprise, he gets the job. Not only that, in a single stroke of instinct by Rei, he is immediately handed the golden keys to the entire Homme line. The fundamental basis for CdG's entire men's universe was now under his control, with nearly zero direction from Rei herself. Kawakubo only told me to make clothes with good taste. She did not interfere at all with the design or material choices. Tanaka felt like he was thrown out into the middle of the wilderness with only this cryptically short instruction from Rei to make clothes with good taste. Funnily enough, I feel like this happens with every single one of Rei's disciples. Junya said something very similar as well. What caused Rei to put such faith in Tanaka, a newcomer? For one, like Rei herself, Tanaka was not classically trained as a designer. He actually was an engineer before he switched careers and enrolled in the Bunka Fashion College. After he graduated, for 6 long years, he was an assistant designer at Monsieur Nicole, one of those DC brands making peacock heat clothing for men that Ray did not like. Tanaka was not completely comfortable with it either. He wasn't into over-the-top romanticism. Instead, he was attracted to the dry and stoic design of Comme des Garçons. And that's why he showed up at the door and got the job. Or maybe it was because he was classmates with 𝗔𝘗𝘁𝗲𝗍𝗃𝗀𝗃. Who knows? So at this point in 1990, Homme had been running for more than a decade. Ray originally sold in Japanese stores only, but the Western buyers who came to Japan to see mainland Comme noticed just how good the stuff was. They begged Ray to sell it overseas. She agreed. What made those buyers fall in love? To Ray, a man's basics are the suit jacket, matching pants, and shirt worn underneath. A well-dressed man's clothes shouldn't be over-designed. His clothes should use solid, high-quality materials, be constructed well, and carry an understated presence. It should reveal the strengths in a man's own personality. And of course, it needs to respect the fundamentals of menswear tailoring. Interestingly, many aspects of those initial designs that impressed the Western buyers are still echoing in the menswear landscape of today. In the 70s, what was popular was the leisure suit, often made of just pure plastic, incredibly flashy, slim, and shaped at the waist. Kind of a bit like today's standard business suit, mass-produced out of plastic with the same slim silhouette. And just like many of today's menswear brands reacting to this slim suit, Ray put out boxy suits and shirts without any darts taking in the waist. For the trousers, she gave you 2 pleats on each leg, giving a wider fit. These were made in very high quality, tightly woven but supple wool, in colors of black, gray, and navy. Just compare this to the other suit, made out of polyester by another Japanese DC brand around the same time. One of them looks like a suit and the other looks like a clothing-shaped object, straight out of Spirit Halloween. And Kawakubo did not plan this out as her perfect male uniform. In fact, she said she just instinctively made what felt right for guys at the time. And yes, if you're a Metronome regular, Yoji's suit was pretty similar. In many ways, Yoji and Comme shared a similar source of design, but branched out in different directions. So now Tanaka has full reign, and his job was not an easy one, because Ray had already set such an incredibly high bar. Tanaka has mentioned that making fashion for men is incredibly painful in some senses. For Comme mainline, Kawakubo's entire ethos is breaking preconceived notions of dress, a kind of freedom. But Tanaka was making basics for guys. He had to operate in the opposite realm of restraint. He could not make outlandish clothes like the ones from his old job, but he still believed that something could blossom despite those restraints. And that path would start from Ray's foundation of quality. Men's clothing tends to have simple designs, so fabric quality becomes important. The vast majority of his pieces were made in Japan from Japanese fabrics, and he added his own spin on it. Normally, when you make a suit fabric, you press and stretch it to make it smooth and flat so it's easy to sew. But when you sew together that suit, it looks like it was designed by committee in a meeting room. You end up with the same suit worn by every single salaryman on the train. No personality that shines through there. But is that really good? I want materials that feel as if they were dried in the sun on purpose. If it's wool, I want to keep its natural loft. If it's silk, I don't want it shiny. I want its original texture. Even after pressing, I want the fabric's bounce to remain. These subtle analog sensations, not digital, determine the mood of the piece. I think that the absolute best example of this is this zipped-up crop jacket that Tanaka made in shrunken wool, one of Kawakubo's trademark techniques. You can tell by the warped zipper, sewn on before it was shrunk. Just look at how much sensation the fabric conveys. And he made this piece throughout his tenure. In fact, the earliest example I could find was from 1992. Doesn't this piece remind you of what many menswear brands are doing today? But what Tanaka said next may surprise you, for it is a complete departure from what we're used to. I'm never thinking about what people want to wear. The details are not that important either. Things like the color of the buttons or the shape of the pockets. You can just decide once and for all, shell buttons for shirts, buffalo horn buttons for jackets. Rather, what matters most to me is the presence the whole piece gives off. For men's clothing, it's things like the nuance of the fabric, tweaking the shoulder width, or shifting the sleeves slightly forward. Tiny changes to the silhouette can create major differences. I thoroughly obsess over fabric and pattern cutting. For Tanaka, the details are not the destination. What's more valuable is the presence, mood, or aura created by the whole piece, the sum of details, fabric, and cut. This is actually one of those Kawakubo-isms that Tanaka knowingly or unknowingly inherited. When Rei was asked, where does she begin the design from, she answers, the most important thing in designing clothes isn't the shape of the collar, the length of a skirt, or anything like that. It's what kind of presence are you creating? What kind of mood are you evoking? Basically, the presence is the entire concept itself. It's the starting point. In fact, according to pattern makers who have worked under Rei, the biggest compliment she can give you about your work is, your piece has a presence to it. Just like how the merit of a work of art isn't what canvas it's painted on, nor whether it's watercolor or acrylic. Instead, it's the presence or aura felt by the viewer. I guess you could say, Rei has been aura maxing before it was cool. For Tanaka, the mission that Rei gave him was to create clothes with good taste. So good taste should not be milquetoast garments that recede into the background even if they're basics. It still needs to have presence. How did Tanaka interpret his mission? Clothes that grown-up men are not embarrassed to wear, but still contain something new. When pressed further, he answers tersely. Masculinity, simplicity, newness, strengths. I'm always trying to mix these elements. The best way to show this is through this Tanaka-era shirt I have. It's a black dress shirt, probably as old as I am, although I don't really know since the tags are completely washed out. And obviously, the quality is quite impressive. It's made from this really incredible fabric, this tightly woven broadcloth. I mean, just listen to how it sounds like. Doesn't that sound amazing? I can't actually check the tag, but I'm very sure this is 100% cotton. It has 16 stitches per inch, which is respectable, but not the best. I mean, it doesn't really matter that much. It's just a detail, and not a particularly big detail at that. Nobody really wears their shirts to a point where they're pulling apart at the seams. And speaking of details, we have shell buttons as the man promised. If you take a look at the inside, there's flat felt seams everywhere, which is pretty standard. But just take a look at how clean and how neat the stitching is, and more importantly, how small the seam allowance is. This is honestly the smallest seam allowance on any shirt I've owned, fast fashion or designer. Overall, it's not that big of a deal. Honestly, it's just another detail. So you can see this shirt is built on the fundamentals of quality. Now let's move on to design. It's said that men's shirts is something that Rei Kawakubo paid particular attention to when she started in 78. I find that all Comme shirts have a very distinctive look. Most notably is the small collar. On screen is a comparison. This design is actually carried over to the shirt line today, and it's been sampled by many brands, including Sean Stussy himself back when he ran Stussy. So by now you would have noticed that something is weird about the pockets. From afar, this looks like a western or a work shirt with two jetted pockets. But if you look closely, there's an extra pocket on the right, and there's a button closure on the left. This is actually a reference to the inside lining of a men's suit, where you find these inside pockets. Isn't that quite amazing? With just these two tiny details, he can transform the shirt into something else. And it's still wearable as a normal shirt, yet it has a presence. I feel like this shirt really shows what the guy meant. Clothes that grown-up men aren't embarrassed to wear, but still contain something new. So here's where I think Tanaka stands above the crowd when it comes to basics. Sometimes, to make something have presence and newness, he needs to betray the expectations somewhere. Expectations of both those working within the company and of the customers. To give basic garments a strong presence, he will actually add eye-catching elements or even something a bit over the top. Like for example, 1997 spring-summer. He made these basic, relaxed fit shirts, crop jackets, pants, all in high quality materials in black, except where he adds this shiny reflective strip. Sometimes it's even transparent or in a bright color. I've been able to find various examples from this season, like these formal front pleated trousers in a 50-50 wool cupra mix with this bright blue fabric strip sewn onto the side. Or this shirt, made from what appears to be 100% cotton Oxford, but the hem is this transparent PVC material. Or maybe this suit jacket from 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗃. The jacket is made from this absolutely incredibly textured fabric, and you can tell it's quite well made, except the collar is this hybrid overlay of what appears to be various vintage shirt collars. Or perhaps this cardigan from 2000. Doesn't this scream Kiko Kostatinov to you? The thing about Tanaka's creations is because of how well he respects the basic shapes of menswear, how his pieces are always well made in quality fabrics, even when he inserts these over-the-top elements. Surprisingly, when you put it on, it still works. It's still very wearable. Often when you look at fast fashion, the clothes look like a toy or a costume, because whatever design they put in there, it is not backed up by respect for the fundamentals, respect for quality. What attracts me to Tanaka is how well he can balance design and wearability. In that sense, he's kind of similar to 𝗵𝗫𝗽𝗍. The magic of Tanaka-era Homme is it gives you a presence without overpowering your personality. I think what's important is, at the end of the day, even though Homme is about the basics and quality, it's equally about newness. Rei and Tanaka have never made any claims to timelessness, unlike Yohji. Besides, if someone actually tried to make timeless fashion, it would probably end up looking very much like Yohji, as I've explained in a previous video. According to Comme's PR person, who's been with Rei since the start, she has a strong urge to resist eras where everyone is facing the same direction. Isn't challenging preconceived notions of beauty what fashion design was supposed to be? Design isn't just about shape, says Rei. It's about what kind of presence, what kind of mood, and expressing what I think is right based on that. Sensitive people start wearing it because it happens to catch the era's current. Before long, the current shifts, and it becomes the closing of a new era. That movement itself is design. In fact, Rei's own designs have done a complete 180 over time. She herself would make over-designed clothes that look like they were lifted out of women's fashion for men in her En Plus line. Because what's interesting in the 1970s is different from what's interesting in the 2010s. And even those over-designed clothes are still rooted in the fundamentals of men's tailoring. Both Rei and Tanaka think what makes fashion interesting is how it's always proposing something new, whether basic or avant-garde. And while the designs may not be timeless, because it's rooted in the fundamentals and it's sensitive to the spirit of the times, time will always circle back to it. Like how we are talking about it here in 2026. In fact, the reason why I think Tanaka-era Homme is especially relevant right now is just how well it matches the spirit of our time. Just think of this shrunken-wool cropped jacket. Isn't this incredibly on trend right now? The fits are boxy and looser compared to the later Junya-era Homme stuff in the 2010s, when everything became slim. I'm sure in 10 years we'll come to appreciate it again, but right now is not the time. So here's some very light purchasing advice for those who want to get into Tanaka-era Homme. First, you can get most pieces for under $250 on Japanese auction, and possibly even less if you find them at a local consignment shop. That's why I think it's perfect for those getting deeper into fashion. It's good, cheap, and relatively abundant. Tanaka ruled Homme between the years 1990 and 2003. You can ID it very easily by the white text on gray tag or the gold text on black tag seen on jackets. You can also look at the AD year designation on every single Comme material tag. And don't pay ridiculous sums for hyped up pieces, like the split logo pieces Tanaka is known for and sampled by the Supreme collaboration. It's still basics at the end of the day. Remember, you're buying clothes, not hyper-fetishized image objects. And lastly, if it costs more than half the price of a new Homme piece, really you should just wait until the new piece goes on 50% sale, it often does, and buy that instead. Since the last 2 years or so, Junya's Homme stuff has the same looser silhouette and is just as good in my opinion. Just go out there, pay attention to the sizing, and find cool pieces that you've never seen before. That's it, thank you for watching, 𝗵𝗫𝗽𝗀𝗻𝗽𝗀𝗻 out.